Welcome. Our channel's growth starts with you. So please support us by hitting the subscribe button. It helps us bring more exciting content your way. My name is Lena Carter, and I was 32 years old when I crossed the line between fantasy and reality. I had a good life, or at least I should have. My husband, Noah, was a kind and hardworking man, the kind of man women prayed for. But kindness didn't pay the bills. Love didn't keep the electricity on. And loyalty sure as hell didn't stop me from craving what I craved. I had always wanted to sleep with a dwarf. It wasn't something I could explain. I didn't even know when the obsession started, but it was always there, this strange, forbidden fantasy lurking in the back of my mind. I never thought I'd act on it until I met Mr. Callahan. The first time I saw him was at a corporate networking event in Chicago. He was a powerful businessman, a self-made millionaire, a dwarf, and when he spoke, people listened. He was sharp, confident, and undeniably attractive, not in a traditional way, but in the way that money and power made a man irresistible. He noticed me staring. I was caught. He approached with a slow, knowing smirk. "You look like a woman with expensive problems." I should have walked away. I should have laughed it off. Instead, I found myself talking, telling him about my husband, Noah losing his job, how we were drowning in debt, and how the bank had already sent a final warning for the mortgage. He wooed me and also made me an irresistible offer, and I took it. The fantasy I had carried for so many years was no longer just a dream. It was real, and it had happened in Suite 1408. Mr. Callahan lay stretched out on the bed behind me, his shirt unbuttoned, his expression unreadable as he swirled the last sip of whiskey in his glass. The room smelled of expensive cologne, sweat, and the faint hint of guilt crawling up my spine. I reached for my phone, still sitting on the nightstand where I had left it. My husband's message glowed on the screen. "Hope you're having a productive business trip." A lump formed in my throat. I could almost hear Noah's voice in my head, soft, trusting. If only he knew. I forced my face into something neutral and typed back. "Exhausting. Can't wait to be home." Home. I didn't deserve that place anymore. I turned to grab my purse, but Callahan's voice cut through the silence. "You're thinking too much." I glanced at him through the mirror. His smirk was still there, lazy and confident. "I should go," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. He didn't argue. He just leaned back against the pillows, watching me. I stood in front of the hotel mirror, smoothing my dress over my hips. My pulse was still racing, and my skin was still warm from what had just happened. I had finally done it. I clutched my coat tighter around me, suddenly feeling exposed. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of the airport. As the car pulled away, I let out a slow breath. This was over. One time. One mistake. I had what I wanted, and now I could go back to my life. But deep down, I knew the truth. Some doors, once opened, can never be shut. The morning after I returned home, Noah kissed me on the forehead before leaving for one of his side jobs. I kissed him back like nothing had changed. But something had changed. I wasn't the same woman he kissed goodbye before my business trip. I should have felt guilty, should have been drowning in shame. Instead, I felt invincible. Like I had tasted something forbidden and gotten away with it. I went about my day as usual, unpacking, doing laundry, pretending. But when I saw the new perfume bottle on my dresser and the designer bag on my chair, I realized I had made a mistake. I had gotten too comfortable. Noah noticed. At first, it was subtle. His eyes lingered on my new clothes, the fresh scent on my skin. He didn't say anything, but I saw the flicker of something in his face, confusion, maybe suspicion. But it wasn't until the mortgage statement arrived that the cracks started to show. That night, he sat across from me at the dinner table, barely touching his food. His fingers drummed against the edge of his plate. "I checked the bank today," he said, voice calm, too calm. I stabbed at my pasta, not looking up. "Yeah? Mortgage is paid off." I shrugged. "I told you, work's been giving me bonuses." Silence. When I finally looked at him, his jaw was clenched, his eyes searching my face like he was reading between the lines of everything I wasn't saying. Noah was smart. Too smart. That night, after I fell asleep, he checked the bank statements himself. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just confirmation that he was overthinking. But then he saw it. Callahan Corporation. Noah frowned. That was not the name of my company. He knew all my colleagues, had met them at work functions. Callahan wasn't one of them. Why would a stranger, a millionaire businessman, pay off our mortgage? The next day, while I thought everything was normal, he was digging deeper. He checked my flight records. I had told him I was going to New York. I went to Chicago. The lie cemented his worst fear. He didn't confront me. Not yet. Instead, he did something I never would have expected. He bought a ticket to Chicago. That evening, I told him I was going out for drinks with friends. He kissed me goodbye. I smiled like I wasn't hiding anything. By the time I walked out the door, he was already at the airport. Hours later, Noah stood outside a high-end hotel in downtown Chicago. And there I was, dressed in silk, laughing, my hand on Callahan's arm. Noah's stomach twisted. This wasn't a business trip. This was something else. And now he knew. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped out of the hotel suite, smoothing down my dress as Callahan walked beside me. He moved with the kind of confidence that only money could buy, small in stature, but larger than life. I smiled at something he said, and as we walked through the lobby, he reached for my waist briefly, guiding me past a couple blocking the way. It was a small gesture, but it felt too intimate, too familiar. And that's when I saw him. Noah, standing near the entrance, staring at me like he didn't even recognize me. My stomach flipped. For a second, my brain refused to process it. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be at home, thinking I was on a business trip. Yet, there he was. And worse, he had seen everything. I jerked away from Callahan so fast, you'd think he burned me. My pulse hammered as Noah's face darkened. But he didn't say a word. No yelling. No confrontation. Nothing. He just turned around and walked out. And that hurt more than if he had screamed. My breath caught in my throat. Move. Run after him. Explain. Say something. But what could I say? Lena? Callahan's voice was smooth and controlled. I ignored him. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I shoved through the revolving doors and onto the street. I scanned the sidewalk, searching. Noah was already gone. That night, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I called. No answer. I texted. Nothing. Then my phone vibrated. One message. Come home. We need to talk. And just like that, the real nightmare began. Now, tell me, if you were Noah, what would you do? Would you even let me step back into that house? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This story isn't over yet. I walked into the house, my stomach twisted in knots. The silence inside was thick, suffocating. Noah sat in the living room, his back straight, his hands resting on a stack of papers on the table. He wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He was calm. Too calm. That scared me more than anything. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to beg, but he lifted his hand, silencing me before I could even try. Then, he pushed the papers forward. Divorce papers. I blinked. My mind struggled to process what was in front of me. The weight of what I had done crashed down on me all at once. It wasn't just over. He was making sure there was nothing left to salvage. And he wasn't stopping there. By the time I realized what was happening, the damage had already been done. My family knew. His family knew. Our friends, our neighbors, even my coworkers, everyone knew. Noah made sure of it. He didn't just expose me as a cheater. He made sure they knew I didn't cheat for love, or even for lust, but for a sick fantasy and a pile of money. The shame was unbearable. My mother wouldn't take my calls. My best friend refused to answer the door when I showed up crying. My inbox was flooded with disgusted messages from people I had known for years. And then came the final blow. Callahan. Noah had reached out to his business rivals. Every detail of our affair. Every payment he made for me. His habit of sponsoring married women. The scandal spread like wildfire. Investors pulled out. His reputation crumbled. And just like that, Callahan dropped me. No more mortgage payments. No more expensive gifts. No more him. I was alone. I had lost everything: my husband, my family, my dignity, my security. But just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Noah looked at me one last time. And with the coldest voice I had ever heard, he said, "This is just the beginning." I had nothing left but regret. Noah didn't scream. He didn't curse me out. He didn't even look at me with hatred. He just looked through me, like I was already gone. I begged. I pleaded. I told him I had made a mistake, that I had lost myself, that I still loved him. He didn't care. Instead, he gave me one last gift: the final, brutal truth. He had taken everything. Every dollar we had left, every asset in both our names gone. Legally his. And if I thought he couldn't cut deeper, he proved me wrong. Our children. I hadn't even considered what this meant for them, what my choices had cost them. But Noah had. He had full custody. I wouldn't be seeing them again. My knees hit the floor. I had destroyed everything. And just like that, he walked away. Not in anger, not in pain, just done. He was free. And I was nothing. Days passed. Then weeks. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. No more Callahan. No more Noah. No more family. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife even deeper, I saw him. Noah. Smiling. Happy. Sitting across from a woman in a cafe, his hand resting over hers. He had moved on. I turned away, heart pounding. I sat alone in my empty apartment, surrounded by reminders of what used to be. My phone felt heavy in my hands. I typed, "Can we at least talk?" I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the send button. Then, slowly, I deleted the message. I looked at the divorce papers on the table. This was the bed I made. And now I had to lie in it. Thanks for watching, but please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More stories are coming.